I was 16 when my father died, and just like that, my entire world crumbled like a dry leaf in autumn. Dad wasn't just a parent, he was the compass that kept me grounded. The man had receipts from 2009 filed alphabetically. He planned his life with precision, from retirement to rainy days. I used to tease him about it, but now I get it. He wasn't just planning life, he was preparing for absence. And he did it well. After the funeral, I found out Dad had locked everything in tight. His will was as thorough as his tax spreadsheets. Every house, every bank account, every dusty storage key, all in my name. Not Mom's, mine. Why? Because they were divorced. I remember sitting in the lawyer's office, stunned into silence. I hadn't even processed the fact he was gone, but there I was, 16 years old, with a lawyer explaining how I now owned 3 properties and a sizable chunk of change. I thought it was a mistake. I was a teenager. I still forgot to charge my phone at night. But the moment I told Mom, her smile cracked. She tried to play it off. "He really adored you, didn't he?" she said with this bright plastic grin. But her eyes told a different story. A storm was coming, and it didn't take long. 2 months after we buried my dad, my mother brought home someone new. His name? Dylan. He moved in like it was nothing. 1 week, we were grieving. The next, there was this stranger in the kitchen drinking from my dad's coffee mug like it was his birthright. That mug hadn't even been washed yet. At first, I tried to keep my distance. I wanted to believe it was just temporary. A rebound, a bad dream. But every day, another piece of my dad's world disappeared. His tools in the garage, sold on Facebook Marketplace. His recliner, replaced with a beige monstrosity Dylan called modern. My dad's hoodie hanging by the back door, gone without a word. "Dylan needs space," Mom said. "But what about Dad's space?" And then came the kicker. "Maybe you could think about selling one of the properties. It'd make Dylan feel more like part of the family." What? Was she seriously asking me to hand over part of my inheritance, part of his legacy, so her new boyfriend could feel at home? I told her no. Not that it mattered. The will had a stipulation. I couldn't access anything until I turned 21. Legally, nothing could be sold, shared, or touched until then. Her reaction? A smile with daggers behind it. "Oh well," she said. "Guess it'll just have to wait." But from that day on, things shifted. It started with subtle things. My opinion no longer mattered. Dylan's kids, a 20-year-old daughter named Macy and her 18-year-old brother Jordan, suddenly became top priority. Weekend getaways? They were always invited. I was told to spend time with Grandma or focus on my studies. At first, I convinced myself I was overthinking. But the more time passed, the clearer it became. I wasn't part of her new world. I was a remnant of her old one, a reminder of the man she moved on from way too fast. Grandma and Grandpa noticed too. They offered me comfort and space, and I clung to that like a lifeline. Most weekends, I stayed at their place, pretending everything was fine. But it wasn't. And Dylan went from awkward to arrogant real quick. By the time I was 17, he acted like he owned the place. Our house, my house, became his stage. "You need to show more respect around here," he'd bark. Respect? From the guy who didn't pay rent and couldn't even fix a leaky faucet? Every time he tried to boss me around, I'd hit him with a "sure thing, Captain." And boy, did that grind his gears. It became my secret weapon. Passive-aggressive? Maybe. Satisfying? Absolutely. Still, things escalated. He started giving me curfews, barking orders, even telling me what I could and couldn't do in my own home. One night, I snapped. "You're not my dad," I told him. "And this isn't your house." His face turned tomato red. Mom jumped in before it turned into an all-out war. But instead of backing me up, she turned to me, exhausted and bitter, and dropped a bomb I never expected. "I think it's best if you stay somewhere else for a while." I laughed, like full-on stunned laughter. "You're kicking me out? From my own house?" Her face twitched. "It's just temporary. Everyone needs space." What she meant was, Dylan needs space, not you. I didn't fight. I just left. I moved in with my grandparents full-time after that. It wasn't fancy, but it was home. It was safe. And it was mine. Weeks passed. Mom called a few times, acting like nothing happened. "We love you, she'd say. "It's just complicated." She brought over a box of my old stuff like it was some peace offering. I stopped responding. At school, I kept my head down. At home, I started focusing. My dad didn't leave me those properties to watch them rot. So I started planning. I still had 3 years until I could do anything legally, but I wasn't wasting time. I studied. I worked part-time. I built savings. I researched renovations. I even began drafting a plan to remodel the house Mom and Dylan were living in. The day I turned 21, that house was going to be mine again. Not in theory, in action. They had no idea what was coming. I didn't mark the calendar or throw a party when I turned 21. No candles, no shots, no big night out. Just a quiet morning at my grandparents' kitchen table, coffee in hand, and a file folder already sitting in front of me. Inside it, everything my dad left me. The deeds, the legal documents, the renovation plans I'd been quietly perfecting for 3 years. My grandfather gave me this look that said, "You ready?" And I nodded, not because I felt ready, but because I knew it was time. It was the kind of moment you can't prepare for, even when you've been waiting years. My first step was supposed to be a simple conversation, a mature, respectful heads up. I thought maybe if I explained everything clearly, if I showed her I wasn't trying to be cruel, maybe it would go smoothly. Spoiler, it didn't. I showed up to the house one afternoon, knocked on the door, and waited. No answer. The car wasn't in the driveway, and the place felt hollow. I texted her, left a voicemail, tried to be polite. I even said I wanted to talk about the future of the property and that it wouldn't take long. But the silence spoke louder than any response ever could. Later that night, over dinner, my grandmother mentioned in passing, "Heard your mom and Dylan are on vacation down in Florida." Of course they were. While I was planning renovations on the house they'd been squatting in rent-free, they were sipping cocktails on the beach. It didn't even make me angry anymore, it just confirmed everything I already knew. They weren't going to play fair, so I stopped waiting. The house was mine. My name was on the deed. I was paying the property taxes. I wasn't evicting them in the middle of winter or tossing them onto the street without warning. I was reclaiming what belonged to me, plain and simple. A few days later, I hired a locksmith and had the locks changed. The moment I turned the key in the new front door, something shifted in me. It felt final. It felt earned. I walked through the house like a stranger visiting an Airbnb designed by a couple who didn't know what subtlety meant. Dylan's weird faux leather furniture, the giant canvas print of some beach he'd probably never been to, the shelf of cheap whiskey bottles like he was some connoisseur, it all felt off. None of it belonged here. Not with the memories of my dad echoing in every room. Replacing the locks felt like locking out a chapter of my life that had overstayed its welcome. But the next morning, the phone calls started. First my mom, then Dylan, then both of them on speaker, leaving me voicemails that escalated from confused to furious in under 12 hours. "Why would you do this?" she demanded. "We were blindsided." Dylan's voice in the background. "This is illegal. You can't just take it." Except I could, and I had. Eventually, the first picked up. She didn't even let me say hello. "You're acting like a child," she snapped. "You changed the locks while we were on vacation?" I stayed calm. "I tried to reach out, Mom. I left messages. I waited." "You didn't respond. Because we were away. You could have waited. I've already waited 3 years." She was silent for a moment, but not because she understood. She was just calculating her next move. "This is still my home," she said, her voice low. I almost laughed. "No, it's not. Not legally, not financially, not anymore." That's when the emotional play started. "So what? You're just throwing us out? After everything I've done for you?" And it was that sentence, "after everything I've done for you," that reminded me why this had to happen. Because for years she treated me like a footnote, a reminder of the past. And suddenly, now that the past came with square footage and a solid foundation, I mattered again. I told her they had 2 weeks to move. I wasn't heartless. I wasn't asking them to pack up overnight, but I wasn't giving them another year either. I could hear Dylan grumbling in the background, cursing under his breath, like a man who'd finally realized he was out of free rides. "We don't have anywhere else to go," she said eventually. "We weren't prepared for this." I kept my voice steady. "You had 3 years to prepare. I didn't blindside you. You ignored the clock because you assumed I wouldn't do anything. Because I didn't think you'd be this cold," she whispered. You're just like your father." I could have taken that as an insult, but I didn't. I took it as proof that I was doing the right thing, because my dad believed in planning, in fairness, and in setting boundaries. And I was doing all three. When I showed up at the house a few days later to measure the floors and check on plumbing before the contractor arrived, they were there. Dylan was in the yard, pacing like a guard dog, while my mom stood on the porch, arms crossed. She didn't say anything at first, just watched me with this combination of disbelief and sadness. "We're still figuring things out," she said eventually. "We'll need more time," I reminded her. 2 weeks. That's it. Then Dylan stepped in, his voice louder than necessary. "You think you can just waltz in here and kick us out like we're nothing?" "I don't think it," I said. "I know it." And then he said it. The line that really pushed everything over the edge. "You're a selfish little brat. This house means nothing to you. You're just power tripping because you got lucky in a will." I paused. Not because I was shocked, but because I wanted to be sure I remembered the moment clearly. The look on his face, the heat in his voice, the way he truly believed he was the victim. I took a step closer. Not aggressive, just firm. "You got to live here for free for 3 years. You were never on the lease. You never paid a cent in taxes. This was never your home. You were a guest. And now your stay is over." He opened his mouth to fire back, but my mom stopped him. "Don't," she said softly. "He's made up his mind." I could see something shift in her then. Not forgiveness. Not understanding, just defeat. Maybe for the first time, she realized I wasn't bluffing. As I turned to leave, she called after me. "You're going to regret this one day." I didn't answer. Not because I didn't have a response, but because I didn't need one. I wasn't doing this out of spite. I wasn't punishing them. I was taking back my life, taking back my father's legacy. And maybe she'd never understand that. Maybe she'd always see it as betrayal. But deep down, I knew I was done living in someone else's version of my life. I had waited, I had tried. But now, it was my turn to move forward. I thought that once the 2-week deadline passed, things would slowly calm down. Maybe they'd pack up, move on, and that would be it. I was hopeful, naively so. Instead, things only escalated. The day before they were supposed to be out, I pulled into the driveway and saw not boxes but bodies. My mom, Dylan, his daughter, Macy. A couple of family friends I hadn't seen since high school. It felt like they were staging a sit-in. As I stepped out of the car, I noticed the looks sharp, pointed, like I was the villain in my own story. My mom rushed toward me, tears already in her eyes, like she'd been rehearsing this moment. "Please," she said, her voice cracking. "We just need a little more time." Dylan was behind her, arms folded, already puffed up like he was ready to make a scene. "You can't seriously expect us to be out tomorrow," he said, like he thought his outrage was some kind of trump card. I stood firm, trying not to let my pulse give me away. "I gave you 2 weeks. I've been fair. This isn't a surprise." My mom's hands trembled slightly as she reached out, touching my arm like that gesture could soften what was already set in stone. "Macy's pregnant," she whispered, like it was some sort of magic phrase that would unlock my empathy. "She's due in a few weeks. We can't just move right now." I froze. I hadn't known. And for a second, I faltered. Because yeah, that changes things emotionally. A pregnant 19-year-old facing eviction hits different. I could see it in her face, 2 wide eyes, hand resting protectively over her stomach, fear sitting just beneath the surface. But I also knew this wasn't about her. This was my mother playing every card she had left. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. "But this isn't about punishment. It's about boundaries. You all knew this was coming." My mom stepped back, tears falling now, but not the kind that come from genuine heartbreak. These were frustration tears, defeat tears. She'd lost control, and she didn't know what to do with that. Dylan, of course, had no such emotional filter. "You're heartless," he spat. "You're doing this for what? A remodel? You'd throw a pregnant girl out on the street for hardwood floors?" That stung. Not because he was right, but because he knew exactly where to aim. But I didn't flinch. "This is about reclaiming what's mine. You've had years to plan. This isn't sudden. It's overdue." Macy didn't say a word. She just turned and went back inside. I saw her shoulders slump as the door shut behind her, and yeah, I felt a flicker of guilt. I wasn't numb. I wasn't a monster. But I wasn't a fool either. And guilt wasn't going to build a future for me. I gave them until the end of the week. It was a compromise, even if no one said thank you. After that, I went home, my real home, feeling heavier than before. My grandmother saw it on my face before I even said a word. "You're not wrong," she told me, handing me a mug of tea. "But it won't always feel good to be right." She was right. The next few days were miserable. The messages started coming in hot. Cousins, aunts, even a family friend, I barely knew all of them texting or calling with their unsolicited opinions. Some were polite, maybe just give her a few more weeks. "It's not like you need the house right now." Others were straight up vicious, "Wow. Real proud of yourself? Hope karma hits hard." One aunt left a voicemail so long it cut off halfway through her rant about how ungrateful I was for everything your mother sacrificed. Funny how nobody ever remembered what I had sacrificed. How I lost my dad, my home, my sense of stability, and then got replaced by a man with a Napoleon complex, and 2 kids who got treated like royalty while I got shipped off to my grandparents. I stopped answering the phone. Let them scream into the void. They weren't there when I needed support. They didn't get a vote now. Still, even knowing all that, it messed with my head. One night, I caught myself staring at the ceiling, wondering if I really was the villain here, wondering if I'd gone too far, wondering if I was punishing them for years of pain instead of just trying to reclaim my life. That kind of doubt, it eats at you. But every time I started to spiral, I forced myself to remember the facts. My name on the deed, my dad's signature on the will, the years I spent being treated like an inconvenience in my own house. The fact that Dylan never paid a dime, that was reality. The rest was noise. By the end of the week, the house was finally empty. No note, no apology, no acknowledgement, just silence and a few pieces of broken furniture they didn't bother to take. When I walked through the front door that last time, it felt surreal. The rooms echoed, the air was still. But for the first time in years, it felt like mine again. I got to work immediately. Paint swatches, tile samples, contractor quotes. I threw myself into the project like it was therapy, and maybe it was. Every brushstroke, every repair, it all felt like rewriting a part of the story, fixing what had been broken, not just the house, but me too. My grandparents came by often to check on progress. My grandfather would nod, hands in his pockets, and say things like, "Your dad would have loved this place." And every time he said it, I believed him more. Slowly, the guilt began to ease. Not disappear, but fade. I wasn't cruel. I wasn't selfish. I was just done waiting for validation that was never going to come. About a month into renovations, I got a call from my mom. I didn't answer the first few times. I wasn't ready, but eventually, curiosity won out. Her voice was quieter than I remembered. No accusations, no drama, just a simple, "I wanted to see how you're doing." I kept it short. "I'm okay." There was a long pause, like she was struggling to decide what to say next. And then, "I'm sorry things got so ugly." That threw me off. I had braced for guilt trips, manipulation, anger, but not this. Not the first sign of reflection. I didn't say much. I just told her I needed to do what was right for me. She said she understood, but I don't know if she really did. And that was fine. Understanding wasn't a requirement anymore. We said goodbye without much ceremony. Just 2 people who shared a history and now lived in separate futures. After that, the call stopped. The texts faded, and the noise quieted. The house came together faster than I expected. New floors, fresh paint, modern fixtures. It looked like a completely different space. And yet, it still held the same foundation my dad built. On move-in day, I stood in the doorway and just breathed. Not because everything was perfect, not because all the pain had vanished, but because I finally felt like I was where I belonged. The house wasn't just finished, it was reborn. And strangely enough, so was I. The paint dried, the tools packed up, the last contractor invoice paid, and just like that, the echo of chaos was gone. What remained was clean, quiet, and mine. But not in the way a deed proves ownership. It felt personal now, like I'd poured something of myself into the walls, into the floors, into the way the light hit the new kitchen tiles each morning. I'd stopped trying to make it look like my father's house again. Instead, I made it something that reflected who I'd become after everything. It still had memories. Sure, his favorite toolbox stayed in the garage. One of his old flannel shirts folded neatly in the linen closet, but the rest was forward-facing. And I needed that. I chose not to live there. As tempting as it was to reclaim every inch, I knew moving in would blur lines I'd just started drawing. Instead, I found good tenants, a young couple with a newborn on the way. They reminded me a little of how things used to feel before it all cracked open. The way they talked about painting the nursery and hosting family dinners felt right. I handed over the keys, smiled, and walked away lighter. I didn't tell them the story of the house. That wasn't part of the rental agreement. Some walls don't need to talk. I shifted focus to school. College wasn't just a backup plan anymore, it was the plan. I poured myself into it the same way I had the house. Early classes, late-night study groups, part-time jobs in between. I stayed with my grandparents through it all. They made it easy. No pressure, no conditions, just a quiet kind of love that asked for nothing in return. My grandmother always had coffee ready at 6 a.m., and my grandfather insisted on dropping me off on campus whenever it rained. Their presence never felt like a crutch. It felt like home base, safe ground to return to while everything else spun. My mom didn't call again for months, and I didn't reach out either. That silence wasn't angry anymore, just settled. We had both said our piece, and now there was nothing else demanding to be spoken. It was strange how normal the distance became, like a phone that stopped ringing and eventually didn't feel missing. Every once in a while, though, I'd get a message, a forwarded meme, a random photo from years ago. No words, just a breadcrumb trail leading nowhere. I never responded, not out of spite, but out of self-respect. Because I wasn't the same kid who used to wait by the window, wondering when she'd finally choose me again. I didn't need her to. I'd chosen myself. I stayed consistent. No drama, no jabs, just space. Meanwhile, word about the eviction still floated through the family tree. An aunt sent me a passive-aggressive email around Thanksgiving. "Just thinking of you, hope your conscience is as warm as your new flooring." I laughed when I read it. Deleted it too. I didn't owe anyone a justification for choosing peace. Let them stew in half-stories and assumptions. I had real things to do. The more distance I created, the clearer everything became. The manipulation, the guilt. The way Dylan had slowly taken over until I didn't even feel like a guest in my own home. It wasn't just about property or money. It was about watching someone erase your father one mug, one chair, one memory at a time, and realizing your mother handed them the pen. There was a moment during finals week, sitting in a noisy campus cafe, when I caught myself smiling for no reason. Just sitting there, books open, earbuds in, coffee half gone, and I felt light. Not happy, not euphoric, but at ease. And that meant more than I thought it would. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was bracing for impact. I started making plans for the next stage. Grad school, maybe, or traveling. I wasn't sure yet, but the road ahead didn't scare me anymore. It looked wide open. One night, near the end of the semester, my grandfather found me on the porch, laptop in my lap, eyes sore from staring at screens too long. He sat beside me without a word, just sipping from his tea. After a while, he said, "You've handled everything with more grace than most people twice your age." I didn't say anything right away, just looked at him, grateful he'd seen it. Then he added, "Your father would have been proud, not just because you stood your ground, but because you didn't lose your heart doing it." That broke something open in me, not in a painful way, more like a dam releasing slow water, because that had been my biggest fear the whole time, that somewhere in the middle of drawing lines and setting boundaries, I'd hardened. That maybe I'd shut so many doors I didn't know how to open them again. But hearing him say that made me feel like maybe I hadn't lost anything. Maybe I'd just reshaped it, reclaimed it. There was one last thing I needed to do, something I'd been avoiding for months. I went back to the house, not to check in or inspect anything. I just stood outside on the sidewalk, watching the porch light flicker on as the new tenants pulled into the driveway. They waved when they saw me. I smiled back. And that was it. That was all I needed. The chapter didn't end with a scream or a door slam. It ended with a wave. Quiet, certain, final. As I walked back to my car, I realized I didn't need to go inside. I already carried everything I needed with me. The lessons, the grit, the memories I chose to keep. I wasn't rebuilding just a house. I was rebuilding myself. And I liked the person standing on the other side of it. The silence between my mom and me settled like dust too light to notice at first, but eventually it covered everything. Months passed. I didn't block her, but I didn't reach out either. Sometimes I'd see her name flash across my phone, not from a call, but from group messages or family announcements, birthday reminders, someone's wedding, that sort of thing. The kind of updates that float around when you're still technically family, even if the bonds feel paper thin. I didn't feel anger anymore, just distance. And distance was easier to manage than hurt. But still, something in me wanted to see how she was doing. Not to fix anything, not to apologize, just to understand the person I had been orbiting my entire life without ever really knowing. So I drove by her new place one evening. Nothing dramatic. I stayed in the car, engine running, music low. It was smaller than the house they'd lived in before, older, a little run down. I saw Macy on the porch, rocking what looked like a stroller gently back and forth. She looked exhausted in that universal new parent way, hair pulled back, shadows under her eyes fixed on the sky like it was the only thing that didn't cry or ask for anything. She didn't see me, and I didn't make myself known. I just watched for a few minutes, long enough to feel something I didn't expect. Not pity, not resentment, just understanding. I had no ill will toward her. She didn't ask to be caught in all this. She was just surviving, like the rest of us. And that made something loosen in my chest. A knot I hadn't realized was still there. A few weeks later, my mom texted, "Simple, just, do you want to meet for coffee sometime?" I stared at the screen for a while. Not because I was angry, just unsure what I would even say anymore. We had spent so long dancing around each other, pushing and pulling and pretending not to hurt. What was left now? But I said yes. We picked a small cafe near the college. Public enough to keep things neutral, familiar enough to feel safe. She arrived before me. Same coat she always wore when she wasn't sure how the weather would go. Hair a little longer, more gray showing, no makeup this time. She looked tired, not in a bad way, just softer, worn around the edges like someone who'd been forced to slow down. We ordered coffee and sat. For a while, neither of us spoke. We just stirred sugar and watched each other over ceramic rims like we were trying to solve an old puzzle with missing pieces. She broke the silence first. "You look good," she said, like that was the easiest place to start. I nodded. "I feel good." Another pause. Longer this time. Then, finally, I wanted to say I'm sorry. Not because I expect anything from you, but because I should have said it a long time ago. I wasn't expecting it to hit the way it did, not dramatically, just deep. Like she'd touched a bruise I forgot I had. "I think I always assumed we'd just figure it out eventually," she continued, "that we could sweep it under enough time and it would disappear. But it didn't. And it shouldn't have." I watched her carefully. She wasn't crying. She wasn't pleading. She wasn't dodging blame either. She was just being real in a way I hadn't seen since before Dylan came into our lives. "It hurt," I said quietly. "Not just what happened with the house, all of it. The way you replaced Dad like he was a broken chair. The way I felt like I had to compete with strangers in my own home. And then being told to leave like I was the problem." Her eyes welled up, but she didn't interrupt. She just nodded. I continued, "I don't think I ever expected you to be perfect, but I didn't expect you to forget me so quickly either." She breathed in slowly, then exhaled like she'd been holding it in for years. I was grieving. I know that's not an excuse, but I was scared. I didn't know how to be alone. And Dylan, he made it easy to not feel things. That admission surprised me. Not because I thought she'd defend him, but because I didn't think she was capable of saying it out loud. "He's gone, by the way," she added. "Left when Macy had the baby, said it was too much." I didn't say anything. There was nothing to say that wouldn't sound like gloating. She wasn't looking for sympathy. She was just giving me the update. "I know I messed up," she said, "and I don't blame you for anything. If you never want to talk again, I'll understand. I just wanted to see you face to face and say, I'm sorry." I looked at her then, really looked, and what I saw wasn't the woman who kicked me out of my own house or defended a man who treated me like an intruder. I saw someone who was broken in her own ways, someone who had made choices out of fear, out of loneliness, out of not knowing what else to do. I didn't forgive her in that moment. Forgiveness, I think, is too layered for one cup of coffee, but I saw her. Not the version I built up in my mind during late nights filled with resentment, but the human underneath all the mistakes. And maybe that was enough. I don't hate you, I said, but I need time. I'm not trying to punish you. I just need to protect what I've built. She nodded, wiping her eyes with a napkin she hadn't unfolded yet. That's fair, more than fair. We talked for a while longer, mostly about nothing. Weather, school, the coffee, which was too bitter but still decent. When we finally stood up to leave, she hugged me, tentative, light, like she didn't expect me to return it. I did, briefly, but it was enough. As I walked back to my car, the air felt lighter, like I'd put something down I didn't even know I was carrying. I didn't rush to call her the next day. I didn't suddenly open the door to weekend brunches or text chains, but I didn't block her either. We stayed somewhere in the middle, quiet, cautious steps toward maybe. I wasn't trying to rebuild the past. I didn't want the version of her I used to chase. I wanted something honest. If we ever built anything again, it had to be on new ground, and if we didn't, that would be okay too, because now I wasn't living out of obligation or guilt or the ache of an old wound. I had peace. I had boundaries. I had a future that didn't revolve around waiting for someone else to see my worth. And that kind of freedom, that was everything. Time passed, not like some dramatic turning of the page, but the way seasons shift without asking for permission. You wake up one day and realize the cold has lifted, the trees are different, and so are you. That's how it felt. The house had tenants who paid on time, sent cheerful updates, and even invited me to see the baby once she was born. I didn't go, but I appreciated the gesture. Sometimes, just knowing you're welcome is enough. College rolled on. I graduated earlier than expected, picked up an offer from a nonprofit that worked with underserved youth. It didn't pay a ton, but it gave me purpose. Most people around me were chasing salary, title, something big and loud. I just wanted something steady, something honest. My grandparents still kept a bedroom for me, even though I moved into a modest studio across town. They said I could always come back, but I never had to. That was the difference between them and everyone else. I never felt like I owed them anything for the love they gave. It was quiet and unconditional, the kind that doesn't need to be repaid. I visited them often. We'd sit on the porch or share simple dinners. My grandfather liked updates on the house, even though I wasn't living there. Still standing? He'd joke, and I'd say, still proud of it. He'd nod like he already knew. My mother and I didn't become close again. We never returned to weekly calls or birthday dinners, and maybe that was for the best. But we stayed civil. Occasionally, she'd text, usually something short, like thinking of you or hope work's going well. I responded when I felt like it. No guilt, no grudge, just space. The last time I saw her in person was a random Tuesday in early spring. I ran into her at a local market. She was holding a bouquet of daffodils and looked surprised but not upset to see me. We made small talk. She told me Macy had gone back to school part-time, that the baby was crawling now, that she was picking up some weekend shifts at a bookstore. She seemed tired, but there was something else in her face too, like a person who had finally stopped running from themselves. I don't know what I expected from that moment. Maybe a swell of sadness or anger, but it never came. I smiled, told her I was glad things were working out, and we went our separate ways. No tears, no drama, just two people who shared a history and had finally made peace with their separate futures. That night, I sat outside my apartment watching the city lights blink like tired stars. I thought about everything that had happened about my dad, about the house, about how things changed so fast it nearly knocked me off my feet. But somehow I was still standing, still breathing, still building. I thought about the moment I first learned the house was mine, the weight of it, the confusion, the loneliness, and how I turned it into something solid. Not just the bricks and paint, but the way it helped me grow. My dad didn't leave me that house because he wanted me to fight over it. He left it because he knew I'd need something to stand on when everything else fell apart. And I had. I'd turned grief into foundation, pain into structure. I had taken all the noise and turned it into quiet strength. People still ask me sometimes if I regret how I handled things, if I'd go back and be more forgiving, more patient, more soft. I always answer the same way. I didn't make those choices out of anger. I made them because I had to learn how to protect myself when no one else would. That's not revenge, that's survival, that's healing. I kept my father's flannel shirt in the top drawer of my dresser, folded neatly, untouched. Not because I wore it, but because it reminded me that someone once prepared for my future like it mattered. When I held it, I remembered the kind of man he was. Precise, loyal, quietly strong. I wanted to become that kind of person, not just for me, but for whoever came after me. There's a kind of freedom in realizing you don't need to be understood by everyone, that your story doesn't have to be retold with perfect balance or shared sympathy. I never gave the full story to my extended family. Let them think what they want. The truth lives with me. Not the version twisted by guilt or passed down through whispers, but the version I lived, the kind where I was pushed out of my own home, stood my ground, and reclaimed it without cruelty. Years later, I passed by the house again. The couple still lived there. It looked even better now, window boxes full of flowers, a new porch swing, kids' bikes leaning against the fence. It didn't make me sad to see it in someone else's hands. It made me proud, because the legacy wasn't the wood or the roof. It was what it gave me. A future, a starting line, a place to step forward from. My dad didn't leave me a house to live in. He left me proof that I was worth protecting, even after he was gone. And that proof stayed with me long after the tenants moved in, long after my mother faded into quiet updates and neutral texts. That proof lived in my choices, in the way I carried myself through grief, through rejection, through doubt. It lived in how I built a life without needing permission from people who once made me feel small. There's a kind of peace that comes from surviving something no one saw you struggle through. It's not loud. It doesn't arrive with applause or recognition. It just shows up in your reflection one day and you realize you like the person staring back. That's where I ended up. Not bitter, not broken, just free. I still have days when the past taps me on the shoulder. A memory, a scent, a voice. But those moments don't own me anymore. I nod, acknowledge them, and keep walking. Because I've learned that closure isn't a door slamming shut. It's just knowing you can leave a room without looking back. And I did, with both feet, and no regrets. Story 2, on Christmas Eve, I got there late. I entered the porch of the house I used to call home, the wind cutting through my coat. Over the town, Vermont had imposed a dense white silence that muffled the outside world in a way that made everything seem farther away. Perhaps appropriate given how far I felt from the individuals that were waiting inside as I walked in. Nobody immediately glanced up. Victoria, my mother, was setting candles on the windowsill. My younger brother Logan was drinking a glass of wine while relaxing barefoot. As if he owned the room, his laughter filled everything. He did, in a sense. That mansion was a testament to his life in every way. I turned to face the fireplace after brushing off the snow and hanging my coat on the well-known hook near the entrance. That's when I noticed it. Above the fireplace hung a huge, proud, nicely framed family photo. With his contrived yet endearing smile, which he has mastered for his photographic business, Logan takes center stage. Standing next to him in a fitted coat was Alicia, my mother's older sister, and, as Victoria started to emotionally wane, my second mother. Victoria herself was dressed in crimson, grinning softly like if she hadn't been ignoring me for the past 10 years. And I was gone. It's just not there, not obscured in the background nor off to the side. It wasn't a careless error. The crop was surgical and purposeful, as if I had never been there. I only gazed for a few brief moments, not long enough for anybody to notice, but long enough to feel the air tighten in my chest and register the knot in my gut. Or perhaps they were unaware, and, as usual, decided not to say anything. We're almost done with dinner. Victoria's voice was sweet and familiar in tone, but not in spirit as she cried out. I adored that voice once. It sounded scripted now. The scent of rosemary led me into the kitchen. I gave Logan a nod. Without touching my cheek, he planted a kiss on it. He remarked, "You made it," as though I were a visitor to his gala. I didn't respond, only smiled a little. The sort that's empty, therefore it costs nothing. We ate and sat. We gave a performance. Logan was questioned by Victoria about his upcoming show. She gave his skin 2 compliments. Alicia mentioned their weekend ski intentions. Nobody inquired about my whereabouts, activities, or even how I got there. A mug bearing the words "World's okay" Sun was given to me. Perhaps I am ironic, but I'm not sure if that was the intention. I left early after supper and made my way to the guest room upstairs. It was the room with the buzzing bulb among the cardboard-smelling bedding, not mine. Reaching for my luggage, I perched on the side of the bed. The thick, ivory-sealed package was still there. I was going to wait till morning, but after looking at that picture, I decided not to. The home was alive around me that night. Somewhere down the corridor, the floorboards creaked with the same beat. Something about cleaning the excellent silver was spoken in Victoria's voice. Then Logan laughed. He seemed effortless and irresponsible, as if he had never understood the significance of stillness. I counted the memories I used to hold near while I gazed at the ceiling. The night I was accepted to the university of my choosing. After expressing their pride, they requested if I could step aside and assist Logan in developing his portfolio. When I phoned in a panic because I was having trouble paying my rent, Alicia informed me that they were setting aside money for Logan's trip to Spain to take pictures. Nobody could recall the name of the person I took home from the dinner. He departed early. I didn't hold him responsible. I told myself I was simply quieter and less charismatic for years. The shadow behind their favorite light. I wasn't invisible, though. They eliminated me. The envelope eagerly waited on the nightstand. I took it in my hands and flipped it over. I had been gathering the materials within for months. Months of public documents, title searches, old letters, and one tenacious attorney named Miss Harper. Someone who understood what it felt like to be undervalued and ignored. Inside that package came the truth. My name was legally attached to something I was informed didn't exist. A heritage, a home, the will of my grandfather. They informed me that he left me mementos and a little sum of money to cover the cost of the burial. That was it. However, the reality was different. I had inherited a property from him, a peaceful rental next to the park. It wasn't glitzy, but it belonged to him. He had also intended it for me. Sole recipient. Complete possession. They had restored it, rented it, and concealed it. When I got by, I survived on it. As I lay in bed, I thought about the picture over the fireplace once again. That neat falsehood, that flawless framing. They used cosmetics to hide the scar of my absence. No, I wouldn't wait for stockings and cinnamon buns. Tomorrow, I refused to stand silently off stage and let them continue to write the story. I would place the envelope on the table and let the quiet do the talking. A scene was not what I wanted. I didn't require one. All I wanted was for people to truly see me. I woke up to the aroma of cinnamon and coffee, which was coated over stress for the first time in years. When things were easier and this house still seemed like it belonged to me, it would reassure me, but now it just served to remind me of what was practiced. Meaningless traditions. Meals devoid of flavor. Victoria, in her typical style, stood in the kitchen downstairs, begging for scrambled eggs. She did the same when she had visitors. Alicia was already sitting, enjoying her typical green tea mix, while idly browsing through her iPad. Logan, of course, was barefoot, smiling and chatting about the weight restrictions for his Icelandic luggage. Or Peru, like socks, he shifted his location. Victoria said, "Good morning," without raising her gaze. "I hope you had a good night's sleep in the guest room. I made a cup of coffee for myself." I said, "The mattress has a personality." She chuckled, thinking I was kidding, but I wasn't. As usual, we got through breakfast without incident. Emotionally detached and meticulously staged. They didn't inquire about anything important. Not my life or my job. They never questioned the fact that I hadn't resided in the flat with the creaking stairs for more than a year. They cheered Logan on with the same fervor they used for joyful toasts as he discussed his new art series, like he was delivering a TED presentation. I kept quiet and observed their patterns, such as how Alicia adjusted her hair in the mirror while Victoria wiped at the counter. How I gave Logan a suede bag, a leather trip diary, and a vintage camera, all of which he unwrapped with inflated thankfulness. He received nothing. I also received a porcelain cup from them that read, "You're somebody's favorite son." The irony was no longer even painful. Simply said, it was expected. After breakfast, I excused myself and went upstairs. To give them time, not because you're exhausted. Give them a little more time to enjoy the comforts of their own tale. Permit them to continue acting. When I descended again, it was a cleanly selected tree. Soft mounds of wrapping paper resembled snowdrifts. Victoria was cleaning the fireplace. Logan had his new backpack in admiration. Alicia had not given herself a cookbook, and she was looking through it. Sitting quietly, I took the envelope out of my coat and set it next to the somewhat empty coffee mugs. Not until Victoria's palm hovered over it when she reached for a coaster did anybody see it. As if it were a misplaced holiday card, she picked it up. "What is this?" "Mostly to herself?" she asked. I said, "That's for me." I didn't speak louder. Alicia looked over. "You were not required to." "I know," I answered. "I desired to." Now they were paying attention. Victoria looked at the envelope as if it were a bite. "Shall we open it right away?" I gave a shrug. "I would rather that you didn't." Naturally, they opened it. With practiced grace, she eased her fingernail behind the seal. Alicia bent over. Still lost in his own world, Logan remained by the fireplace. There was a slow rustle as the papers unfolded. First page, then second page. The atmosphere changed. Victoria squinted her eyes. Alicia frowned as she leaned closer. Logan looked up, feeling the tension for the first time, though he didn't fully comprehend it yet. "What is this?" Alicia inquired. Furrowed brows. She got no response. Not just yet. So I stood calmly and steadily. I believed the time had come. "You knew," I said. "Grandpa's will is that." Victoria gently raised her head. "We have witnessed his will. We took care of the estate." "I couldn't, sorry. You informed me you were in charge of the estate. I never saw the entire material from you. You informed me that he departed with some cash as mementos." Alicia blinked rapidly. "There was nothing else." "That's odd," I said, "because the county record office and Miss Harper, my attorney, say otherwise. The property on North Cedar, the one by the park, it was left to me, sole recipient." "It's in the will." Silence expanded like fog. "That can't be." Victoria started. I turned to Logan. "You used that house for a picture shoot last year, remember? You tagged the location. You termed it rustic simplicity with generational vibes. That was my house." He looked astonished. "Wait, your home?" "Indeed." "What about the renovations?" "Not authorized. The rent was unlawfully collected." I needed evidence, so I remained silent until now. I got it now. As if they were radioactive, Victoria set the papers on the coffee table. "This, Ethan. Families don't operate like this." "Families?" Softly, the first repeated. "Do you mean the ones that crop a family photo of themselves?" Alicia's voice became urgent and low. "We assumed you wouldn't want the duty. You've been so far away all along." "You made it obvious that I was no longer involved. Therefore, I declared I was far away." Logan got up, crossed arms, defensive. "Are you only punishing us with this?" "No," I said. "It's mine, therefore I'm doing this." Victoria took a step closer, her voice now shaking. "We relied on that revenue." "We? Then you ought not to have taken it," I said. "This is reclaiming, not retaliation." They remained silent, simply gazed. Logan appeared to have recently received a smack. Alicia's mouth vanished when her lips were squeezed so firmly. Victoria appeared to want to weep, but was unable to recall how. I grabbed my coat. "If you go now," Alicia muttered, "don't count on returning." With my hand on the doorknob, I stopped. I then turned to look at them one final time. That, in my opinion, was the first sincere statement made all day. After that, I went outdoors. Once more, the snow was falling steadily and gently. The cold cut my cheeks, and the air was polluted by my breath. Yet it felt almost purifying. I climbed in, turned on the ignition, and went for a drive. No remorse, no rage, just the silence that results from being noticed at last, even if you're alone. I waited 3 weeks for a response. It was a Monday evening when the first communication arrived. Victoria sent it. Brief. "Be cautious." It as if she had revised it several times before hitting the send button. "Hello, Ethan. We believe there has been a misunderstanding based on our conversations. Is it possible for us to speak this week? I hope all is okay with you. I adore you. Don't punctuate love." You just left those words hanging awkwardly, as if they were an inappropriate feeling. I didn't respond. Another one arrived 2 days later. Don't let this one incident destroy everything, please. Logan is furious. Alicia is making an effort to maintain her composure, but you know how she reacts when she is caught off guard. Taken by surprise? I thought about the word for a long time. Not deceived. Not made public. I was just taken by surprise. As if their failure to anticipate my time was their sole error. I also didn't answer that one. Then Alicia left a voicemail. I didn't pay attention. I simply gazed at the notification until it vanished into the screen's backdrop. She last referred to me as kiddo to justify my exclusion from the family trust. She had said, "You're the independent one. You always manage to solve problems." Interpretation. We were aware that you wouldn't argue with us. Perhaps they were correct then, but I wouldn't have now. Explanations based on omissions didn't appeal to me. No desire for revisionist benevolence. Logan then sent a message. Do you truly believe that this elevates you above us? No punctuation, no greeting. It was like a shove in the hallway, a flat challenge. A day later, Mom received a second text message saying that Alicia was stressed. They're considering selling the condominium. Did you want that? Well done. I read that one twice. It told me something they hadn't said aloud, not because it hurt. I had more than just a memory of the house I had reclaimed. It had served as everything's cornerstone. Logan's city apartment, Alicia's trip, and Victoria's mortgage payments were all covered by the rent from the 3 apartments. It helped pay for the birthday cruises, the holidays, and the renovations they shared online using hashtags like blessed and modern farmhouse vibes. The first thread was pulled when that house was reclaimed. I hadn't even requested back rent, but it appears that things are getting easier now. Not just yet. Early in the spring, rumors started to resurface among friends. I ran into our former neighbor, Clara, at the downtown bookstore. Her kindness had never wavered. The kind that sends handcrafted cards and remembers birthdays. She put a gentle hand on my arm and said, I hear your family has had a rough go of it. Are you still in charge of that location on North Cedar? Yes. I nodded. Still mine. She didn't press, just smiled. You look good. Like you're sleeping better. I was for the first time in years. A month later, I learned through a friend that Alicia had picked up part-time hours at a boutique downtown. The kind of place she used to shop at cashmere scarves, curated candles, monogrammed totes. Now she rang them up for influencers and tourists. Probably told herself it was temporary. Victoria had started consulting again. That meant calling old clients, offering advice. No one had asked for hoping someone still owed her a favor. Logan was back living at home, his downtown apartment too expensive without the family's subsidy. His art collective had dissolved or imploded, depending on who you asked. He launched a GoFundMe for a new creative rebirth. It raised $83. 2 of those dollars came from someone I vaguely remember dating in college. That detail made me laugh unexpectedly, not cruelly, just with recognition. The kind of laugh you let slip when the absurdity finally becomes clear. Meanwhile, I got to work on the house, my house. It was in rough shape at first. Dust in the corners, peeling paint fixtures left, half installed by whoever had last renovated it. But the bones were nice, solid. I hired a small team to help: a contractor, a painter, someone who specialized in old windows. I removed away the furniture they had kept there, donated most of it. I retained one piece, a navy blue recliner I knew from childhood. It was the only item that didn't feel like it came with strings attached. The tenants were kind. One put a message pinned to my door after I decreased their rent. You're the only landlord who's ever treated us like human beings. Thank you. I stood there for a long time after reading it. Longer than I probably should have. It wasn't the affirmation I'd sought, but it was the first time in years someone had recognized me as something more than a placeholder. A name in a ledger, a responsible city to govern, and that meant something. The stillness that followed wasn't weighty anymore. It wasn't a gap I was desperate to fill. Space was created, space to breathe, to go, to start over, without my story being burdened by the corrections of others. I stopped looking at my phone for unanswered apologies. I stopped expecting to feel guilty under the pretext of love. I began to sleep through the night, and I was no longer waiting for them when I woke up. The letter came in the middle of summer, nor an email, nor a text. A letter sealed with a fading flower sticker, scrawled in Victoria's looping calligraphy. No address for return. I spent a considerable amount of time standing by the mailbox, holding an envelope, feeling the warm air caress my skin. The droning of cicadas serves as a gentle reminder that time passes whether or not we are around. I took a while to open it. I finally took a seat beside the living room window, which is my living room, and cautiously opened it. A subtle, flowery, and familiar aroma wafted from her. The same scent that clung on her childhood scarves. 2 well-written pages with an apologetic tone, if not in content. We were unaware that it was deliberate. All we cared about was what was best for everybody. Then came the sentence that stuck with me for a longer time than I anticipated. You've always been really resilient. We were unaware that you need anything from us. It had that form, didn't it? That calm, practical tale. They used strength as an explanation for their absence, ignoring their independence. It wasn't mean. Not quite. It was praise disguised as erasure. This was the letter's conclusion. We're hoping you'll return home eventually. We might be able to start afresh. Perhaps we can reunite as a family. The house, years of rent theft, decisions taken without my input, and a legacy all but forgotten were not mentioned. I put the letter in a drawer after folding it. I didn't discard it, but I also didn't respond. She didn't get in touch with him again. Years went by. A note would sometimes slink through, sent by a distant cousin, an old family acquaintance, or a Christmas card that stated, "Thinking of you. 1 year. I hope all is okay with you." No address for return. Even though I didn't respond, my anger had subsided. Not at all. Long ago, the fire had extinguished itself. Bitterness was not what remained. Clarity was the key. In every way possible, the house in North Cedar became mine. I chose to live there because it was calm, serene, and mine, not because I had nowhere else to go or out of resentment. I managed the garden in the rear, where wild mint grew between the stones, fixed the mailbox, and repainted the front porch. I stocked the windowsills with light-demanding plants and little else. Resilient organisms that understood how to survive without a lot of care. On the mantel over the front window, I preserved the navy blue chair. Now there's a picture of me with the keys in my hand, standing on the porch with the sun behind me. That photo didn't need to be cropped. There was no need for anyone else to be present. At the neighborhood market last month, I ran across Claire once more. With the sincerity of someone who never required an apology to show goodwill, she shouted my name while she was choosing tomatoes. "Do you still call the Cedar House home?" she inquired. She gently nodded. "I am." I softened. "Well, Ethan, you look good. I'm happy." I was too. I am not because I prevailed or regained what was rightfully mine, but rather because I gave up on attempting to fit into a family model that demanded my disappearance in order for me to be accepted. There was no spectacular showdown, no last standoff. A new existence was created by a succession of silent choices. I gave Miss Harper's office the remaining rent documents. She had asked if I wanted to prosecute charges, seek back money, or seek reparation. It wasn't that they didn't deserve repercussions, I informed her. It's because I no longer need them. They didn't have to punish me to keep my peace. In least she used to hold meetings in the old cafe, which I occasionally go by. It is currently a yoga studio. Despite people's resistance, the world evolves. Logan continues to publish on the internet, sometimes including open books, side shots of herbal tea, ambiguous captions about overcoming obstacles, and inspirational quotes. People forward stuff, but I don't follow him. I guess he's rebuilding or attempting to. The condo is still occupied by Victoria. Smaller, last I heard. She is currently a historical society volunteer. I have my own thoughts, though not the version of the past that involves me. She is attempting to preserve something, and it's okay. I gave up expecting an apology. I don't need it, so then everything would make sense. Money, homes, and jewelry are examples of summoned hesitancy. Some take the shape of teachings, hard, unforgiving realities that make you decide between being who you are and becoming what they want you to be. I inherited something greater, but not the affection I desired. Stillness, space. Finally, my name was written in ink rather than pencil. This year, the last snowfall occurred early. The air was pure and fresh as I watched it fall from the front steps, cup in hand. The ancient radiator buzzed the home somewhere behind me. Despite the cold, my home remained sturdy and cozy. No expectations, no performances, just tranquility. I've discovered that this type of inheritance is impenetrable. Story 2, I never imagined that I would be the one writing this, yet here we are. Nathan is my name. Aaron, who is 29 years old, was my spouse until recently. I am 34 years old. Nearly 6 years ago, we met at a business networking event in Chicago. After major presentations, the relationship began with late-night project grinds and cocktails. It was simple, natural, and that familiarity developed into something more over time. After 3 years of dating, we were married. 2 years, married, no significant problems, no big altercations, and no emotional detachment. Erin's sharpness, warmth, and beauty gave the impression that she was above my capabilities. She loved me, nevertheless, in some way, or so I believed. My 28-year-old stepbrother Colin moved in with us around 6 months ago. Colin has never been consistent, a self-centered individual who vacillates between employment with little commitment. In the most recent drama, he was sacked for attending a Zoom client presentation while intoxicated. Really? When I was 15, my dad and Colin's mother were married. Requested permission to stay with us in New York until he readjusted. Although I wasn't happy, Aaron was surprisingly cool with Colin moving into our guest room since family guilt works wonders. I established certain guidelines: no visitors, no disturbances, and most definitely no using our house as his own after party location. I was surprised when he did. Colin would go out most evenings for a while, at least, then sneak back in around dawn, looking like a vampire with a hangover. He was courteous, though, cooked for us a few times, and even assisted Aaron in repairing the creaky cabinet that I had been neglecting for months. Oddly domestic. Not common. Colin. I had arranged a little business trip to Vegas for around 2 weeks into his stay. She got a stomach ailment the night before, so Aaron and I decided to make a weekend out of it, a little vacation. She demanded that I go even though I tried to reschedule. Colin promised to stay home and look after her. Despite my hesitation, I went. Aaron was up and about when I returned on Saturday morning, and she reported feeling better. Colin was more subdued than normal. After that, spend more time at home. He claimed to be saving money, which is all well and good, but something about it itched my skin. I initially attributed it to post-trip exhaustion, but little issues began to accumulate. Aaron was there when I arrived home early one day, saying she had taken a half day off due to a headache. She and Colin arrived as I walked in another day. We just ran into each other outside together. I said. She said. I didn't have any concrete evidence, therefore I couldn't declare this is it. But I couldn't shake a gut instinct. In passing, I inquired about Colin's anticipated length of stay. Told him that although having him had been enjoyable, it might be time for him to get back on his feet. I'll be out by the end of the week, he remarked. When I stated that, Aaron was there in the room. She didn't dispute, didn't even respond, sat there as if it didn't concern her. Colin left in silence. Not a drama. And then everything returned to normal for a bit. Nearly typical. I began to tell myself that it had all been in my head. Aaron then informed me of her pregnancy 2 weeks ago. She was excited and radiant, claimed it was a joyful accident but a surprise. I said all the proper things and smiled, but on the inside, I fell apart. The thing is this. We decided to hold off on trying for children until she was 30. Although I had hoped to begin sooner, I respected her schedule. We were cautious at all times. I never once missed protection because she was unable to use chemical birth control. We were meticulous and made no errors. She was now 2 months along in her pregnancy. That was precisely when Colin had moved in with us. I made an effort to remain composed. Yes, I did. I wanted to think the math didn't matter, and that it was But every waking moment was plagued by the doubt. A week of restless nights later, I asked her outright. I stated that when we were eating supper. Aaron, I have a serious question for you. I apologize, but I must know. Is the child mine? Her face was devoid of color as she froze. Then she blew up. She called me nasty, neurotic, and repulsive, just for asking. Claimed she wouldn't be unfaithful to me. accused me of having a mental illness. Her voice cracked as she screamed. I attempted to explain that it wasn't only the timing, but I remained composed. It was all that transpired throughout Colin's time with us. The tiny alterations, the strange transformations. For peace of mind, I informed her that I wanted a paternity test, just to be able to proceed. For her, that was the last straw. She snapped, said that I was betraying her trust and degrading her, said that she needed time to reflect. We each slept in a different room. Days went by without a word. She completely avoided me. Then she was gone when I woke up one morning. Nothing, no text, no call, no note. In a frenzy, I phoned her family, her office, and her pals. No one was aware of her location. Her helper seems taken aback as well. Aaron didn't tell anyone that he had taken some personal time off. Why? She rang right before I called the cops. She was all right. I'm irritated that I got involved, she remarked. I was overreacting, according to her mother. Hung up after saying she will be home tomorrow. That night, I didn't get any sleep. She appeared different, almost joyful, when she returned the next morning. Nate, she said, I made it right. I took care of the baby as it was ruining us. I blinked. You mean that you took care of it? She stated I had an abortion. We are no longer required to fight. I was unable to talk. My mouth became parched. She appeared so content and at ease. It was as though I had forgotten who she was. Without a word, I walked away. I failed to bring a bag. I didn't turn around. I just left our apartment that day, stepping out the door without pausing until I was outside my lawyer's office. I wasn't simply abandoning my spouse. 6 years of my existence were coming to an end. I immediately phoned my lawyer and told her everything. Everything: the pregnancy, the abortion, Aaron's affair. I informed her that I didn't want Aaron to touch any of my money and that I wanted a divorce. Fortunately, our flat was mine long before I ever met her. One less thing to be concerned about. I got into a hotel and my lawyer scheduled a meeting for the following morning. I switched off my phone for the evening. For only a few hours, I had to vanish. While waiting outside my lawyer's office the following morning, so I called Colin. It was brief. I asked him whether he had slept with Aaron and informed him that I was divorcing her. A long gap was followed by silence. I apologize, dude. I only needed to hear that. I didn't shout. I didn't swear at him. Before my lawyer entered, I just hung up and gazed at the wall. She was straightforward, intelligent, and effective. She informed me that we had a strong argument against alimony if Aaron pressed for it. Aaron earned a comfortable living for herself. We also have timeframes that were truthful: doctor's appointments, text records, and proof. More significantly, I responded to the request for a paternity test. That is not how any rational, faithful spouse would have responded. I instructed my attorney to take strong action. The money wasn't the only factor here. It has to do with principle. Right now. I returned to the apartment that afternoon while Aaron was still at work, packed all her belongings, including toiletries and clothing, into 3 bags, put them outside the door, contacted a locksmith, and had the locks changed. I had no desire to see her. She wasn't welcome in our area. I returned to the hotel when everything was over. As soon as I turned on my phone, it lit up. Voicemails, missed calls, and messages. Everything from Aaron. I choose to disregard them. Hours went by. Then Colin sent me a message. Aaron had apparently contacted him to see if we had spoken. I knew everything, he told her. That it was finished. He apologized once more. I didn't even try to respond. When I eventually broke in that evening, I contacted Aaron's mother. Now, don't assume that I was only seeking revenge. Listen to me. Aaron's parents are traditional conservatives from the South. Since the day we were married, they have been pestering us about our grandchildren. Aaron wanted to wait, so I kept it a secret from them. Even if I didn't agree with her, I always had her back. But after everything she did, the cheating, the lies, the abortion without a word, I had finished keeping her safe. So I was honest with her mother. Everything. She didn't believe me at first, but I had receipts. She should ask Aaron personally, I said. After then, it didn't take long. Aaron blew up my phone about an hour later. Anger calls, voicemails that are screaming. I was accused of wrecking her life in dozens of texts. Said that her parents had cut her off because they were upset. No more inheritance, no more funding, nothing, she said. She had nowhere to go, that everything was gone from her. I meant it when I told her it wasn't my concern, she murmured, petty, and summoned me. I acted immaturely by involving her parents, said that I was attempting to ruin her. She did that on her own, I told her. I hung up after that, she continued. She continued to phone and text me, threatening to drag me to court and drain me of all my money. I didn't answer. I concentrated on the following stages instead. I made sure she was still showing up for work by getting in touch with her assistant. I requested that the assistant not let her know I had phoned. Said that I had a surprise planned. I had already changed the locks, but Erin hadn't realized yet. I saw my lawyer again that day and provided her all of the pregnancy's documentation, including the first OB, images of her SMS confirming that she stopped the pregnancy, the positive test, and the visit. I also shared Colin's confession with her. I was prepared to put a lot of effort into my argument. Just a fresh start, no shared assets, no alimony. Erin was not impressed. She first refused to comply, tried to use text to guilt-trip me, informed common friends that I was overreacting, and claimed that I was destroying our future because of a miscommunication or a misinterpreted conclusion. I wanted to chuckle. After a while, I received another message from Colin. He stated that if called upon, he would be prepared to testify. He felt remorse for everything, that he no longer wanted anything to do with her and blocked Erin on everything. I didn't trust him, but I did appreciate the gesture. Nevertheless, his assistance bolstered my argument. I had no intention of denying leverage. My dad told me that Colin was in need of his financial assistance since he was broke once more. Colin was made aware of by Dad, made my situation worse. He'd be permanently disconnected. Colin became incredibly cooperative all of a sudden. It's funny how people become more honest when they have money. Erin explored every possibility in the weeks that followed. Guilt comes first, followed by gaslighting and threats. She said that I was destroying her life and stealing all she had fought so hard to achieve. I told her I wasn't unfaithful. I told the truth. I didn't sacrifice our marriage for a brief affair. She was just that. She now had to face the repercussions. Things began to move after a few months when we were able to get her to meet with her attorney. After her own attorney viewed the amount of evidence, which included Colin's messages, doctors' reports, and statements, Erin continued to attempt to get alimony. He told her to give up. I proposed a just division of our shared property. Her personal belongings were hers to keep. I would hold on to mine. That was it. No favors, no extras. She finally consented. About 6 months after it all began, we signed the divorce papers. 6 months have passed since our divorce was completed. After everything, you would think, it would make me feel lighter. As soon as the ink dried, I felt as though a burden had been removed from my chest. In actuality, though, it took time. The moment you shut a chapter, healing doesn't happen. In subtle ways, it infiltrates. Erin's belongings were gone, and I returned to my apartment. At first, it didn't seem like home. There was a memory in each room. In the back of the cabinet is her favorite cup. Behind the couch was one of her hairbands. Small reminders that formerly had a positive connotation. They simply hurt now. I started anew after getting rid of everything, rearranging the furniture, painting the walls, and getting new linens. I even purchased a few of plants. And for some reason, those minor adjustments made breathing easier. Erin, meantime, did not completely go. Not immediately. She attempted to contact me through common acquaintances and burner accounts, but I remained true to my promise. All correspondence was routed via our attorneys. That quietness turned become my tranquility. Colin also avoided contact. My dad told me he was attempting to get his life together and had obtained a job back in the city. I didn't give a damn. I no longer had him in my life. Blood or no blood. My dad then contacted me unexpectedly a few weeks ago and said he needed to chat. It appears that Erin and Colin are once more dating. Yes, take a moment to process that. They somehow found their way back to one another after everything, the lies, the suffering, the mess, like two people scuttling through the rubble they had created. They pretended not to light the match. My initial response was numb. I was not angry, did not strike a wall. I simply sat there and let it fall. To be honest, I should not have been shocked. Perhaps they are worthy of one another. Perhaps it is how they define a fresh start. However, in my opinion, that was the final nail in the coffin. Any last uncertainty I might have had perished there. According to my dad, he informed Colin that he was done with him and didn't want to interact with any of them. Thank you for that. As much as I needed to hear that, I believe he needed to speak it out. Things have remained stable ever since. Work has been going well. I returned my attention to my health, eating healthier, going to the gym, and getting a decent night's sleep. I've gotten back in touch with former pals, created new ones as well. Those who stayed after the disaster and knew me before. I'm not in a rush to get into a romantic relationship. Not quite yet. I'm simply relearning how to live for myself at the moment, how to believe on my own intuition, how to sit in quiet without being afraid. However, this is the one thing I've learned from it all. You may put your everything into someone, your future, your affection, and your commitment. However, they will still set it on fire if they are not prepared to respect it. And if they do, you walk because you finally remembered who you are, not because you're weak, when the light isn't dimmed by them. I once heard Erin say that we were destined to age together. She meant that until someone more interesting came along, it turns out. I'm not resentful, though. I'm not seeking retribution. For me, the truth did all the job. She lost her inheritance, a marriage, and the admiration of everyone who had ever put their confidence in her. I only lost someone who wasn't worthy of me. Whether she wants to play house right now with Colin, they are in charge of that. I'm permanently out of it. The narrative finishes with me standing on my own 2 feet and at last at peace, even though it may not have a spectacular revenge or a viral moment of karma. And to be honest, that's sufficient.